At 5:30 in the morning, when most of Springfield was still asleep, Jason Barrett was already standing in the kitchen, waiting for the coffee maker to finish hissing and bubbling. He leaned against the marble countertop, rubbing his eyes and listening to the silence of the house, especially precious in those few minutes before the usual morning hustle and bustle began. His plaid pajama pants and worn T-shirt with the Illinois Tech logo contrasted with the immaculate kitchen. Magnets held Pearl's school schedule, several of Milo's drawings, and a shopping list in Vanessa's neat handwriting to the refrigerator. Jason took out his favorite mug, a bulky white cup with the words, "Engineers do it with precision." It was a gift from Vanessa on their 5th anniversary, when jokes like that still made them laugh sincerely. He filled the mug to the brim and took the first burning sip that brought him back to life every morning. 42 was the age when the body began to send the first signals of its mortality. Nothing dramatic, a crack in his knees when climbing stairs, the need to squint when reading small print, a few gray hairs in his dark hair. But Jason kept in shape. He went to the gym in the basement of their house 3 times a week. Discipline, he would tell his children, is what separates desires from achievements. He opened his laptop to check his email as he had done every morning for the past 15 years. Today's schedule: 2 meetings with suppliers, a review of the water treatment plant project, lunch with the engineering team. In the evening, Milo's soccer practice. Just another Tuesday for Jason Barrett, lead engineer at Ecotech Solutions. He heard light footsteps on the stairs and smiled without looking up from his screen. "Good morning, sleepyhead." "I'm not a sleepyhead," Pearl, the Barrett's 13-year-old daughter, muttered sleepily, shuffling her feet toward the refrigerator. Springy chestnut curls framed her face, which still bore traces of sleep. "But you're up early." "I have a science presentation today," she said, taking out a carton of orange juice and pouring herself a glass. "I wanted to rehearse one more time." Jason nodded, feeling a surge of pride. Pearl had inherited his methodical nature and striving for perfection, but fortunately, she had also acquired her mother's social skills. At 13, she was a favorite of her teachers and had a close circle of friends, something Jason had never had at her age. "I can listen if you want," he offered. "Not now, Dad," Pearl shook her head, leaning against the refrigerator. "I'm still gathering my thoughts." Jason knew his daughter wasn't one to ask for advice. She always preferred to solve problems on her own, and he respected that trait in her, even if it sometimes made him feel a little distant. By 6 in the morning, the Barrett kitchen was a well-organized mess. Milo, Jason, and Vanessa's 10-year-old son fidgeted at the table, trying to eat his cereal and finish the comic he had started the night before. His brown hair stuck out in all directions, and his hazel eyes, just like his father's, were focused on the drawing. "Milo, eat your breakfast," Jason reminded him, checking the contents of his briefcase. "If we want to get you to Dr. Phelps before school, we have to leave in 15 minutes." "I'm almost done," the boy muttered, adding the finishing touches to his superhero drawing. "Look, Dad, it's you." Jason glanced at the paper. The superhero with his facial features was holding something that looked like blueprints, and strange devices were drawn around him. He's an engineer hero, explained Milo, his mouth full. He saves the world with his inventions. Impressive, said Jason, ruffling his son's hair. But superheroes need to go to the dentist on time, too. Upstairs, the sound of a hairdryer could be heard. Vanessa was getting ready for her workday. 10 minutes later, she came down to the kitchen. A slender woman with dark brown hair pulled back into a neat ponytail, wearing a dark blue suit that accentuated her blue eyes. "Good morning, team," she kissed Jason on the cheek and hugged the children. "Is everyone ready for today?" Vanessa Barrett radiated that special energy that attracted people. Even after 15 years of marriage, Jason sometimes caught himself thinking how lucky he was that she had chosen him. As a senior analyst at Midland Financial, she had a sharp mind. "I'll take Milo to the dentist," Jason said, "and then drop him off at school. Can you handle Pearl?" "Sure," Vanessa nodded, pouring herself some coffee from a thermos. "I have a meeting at 9, but we'll make it." Their morning was carefully choreographed, each knowing their role and timing. It provided the stability Jason valued so much. Planning, predictability, order, the foundations on which he had built his life. Half an hour later, Jason and Milo were in the car, heading for the dentist's office. Springfield was waking up. People were rushing to work. School buses were picking up children. Shop owners were raising their blinds. "Dad, why is the sky blue?" Milo asked suddenly, looking out the window. "Because of light scattering," Jason replied automatically. He faltered, looking at his son in the rearview mirror. The boy had already lost interest, watching a fire truck drive by. Jason smiled. Milo was a lively, curious child who always asked questions, but rarely waited for complete answers. He was like Vanessa in his ability to live in the moment, a quality Jason had always envied. After taking Milo to the dentist and dropping him off at school, Jason arrived at Ecotech Solutions, a 2-story glass and concrete building on the edge of Springfield's business district. The company specialized in designing environmentally friendly water supply and wastewater treatment systems, work that gave Jason a sense of purpose. The day flew by with drawings, calculations, and meetings. Before lunch, Vanessa sent him a message. "Please pick up my blue dress from the dry cleaner." Jason frowned as he stared at the screen. A blue dress? The one Vanessa only wore on special occasions? He didn't remember them planning anything for Friday. Maybe a company event she had forgotten to mention. He sent a quick, "Okay, I'll get it," and went back to work, putting the question off until later. The evening was spent with the family as usual. Milo's soccer practice, helping Pearl with her algebra homework, dinner prepared by Vanessa, pasta with a sauce she brought back from a trip to Italy a few years ago. At the table, Pearl talked about her presentation. Mrs. Holland said it was the best in the class. Milo talked about a new goalkeeping technique he had mastered, and Vanessa shared a story about a strange client. Jason watched them, feeling warm and grateful. This was everything he had ever wanted, his little universe at the dinner table. After dinner, when the children had gone to their rooms, Jason and Vanessa stayed in the kitchen. He washed the dishes, she dried them. "What's the event on Friday?" he asked, handing her a clean plate. "The one you need your blue dress for?" "Oh, it's a company dinner," Vanessa replied, carefully arranging the plates in the cupboard. "Bancroft wants to celebrate closing the deal with Western Technologies. We managed to beat First National and take their accounts." "Sounds important," Jason nodded. "It is," she smiled slightly. "You know, really, Vanessa, that's wonderful." Jason hugged her with his wet hands, making her laugh and push him away. "I'm sorry, but I'm so proud of you." "It'll be a lot of work," she warned, wiping the water from her blouse. "I may have to stay late sometimes." "We'll manage," Jason said confidently. "You deserve this chance." Later, lying in bed with a book on the history of engineering, Jason always read before bed, He glanced over at Vanessa. She was sitting up, leaning against the headboard, checking something on her phone. The light from the screen illuminated her face, giving it an almost unreal appearance. "Are you going to read?" he asked, pointing to the unfinished novel on her bedside table. "Not tonight." She shook her head, her eyes still fixed on her phone. "I have to answer a few work emails." Jason nodded and returned to his book. They sank into a comfortable silence, two people busy with their own things but still together. After a while, he noticed that Vanessa was smiling as she looked at the screen. "Something interesting?" he asked, marking his page. "Hmm?" She looked up as if she had just noticed him. "No, just Carol sent me a funny story about her dog." Jason knew Carol, Vanessa's friend from college. They didn't see each other often, but they kept in touch. "How's she doing?" "Fine." Vanessa put her phone down. "I think she got a promotion at global marketing. I'm happy for her." Vanessa stretched and turned off her bedside lamp. "I think I'm going to get some sleep. I have to get up early tomorrow. Meeting with the new project team." "Sure." Jason leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. "Good night, honey." "Good night, Jay." She turned on her side, her back to him. Jason read for a while longer before turning off the light as well. In the darkness, he listened to his wife's steady breathing, the distant sound of music coming from Pearl's room. She was probably still awake even though she should have been asleep, and the quiet hum of the air conditioner. The sounds of his home, his fortress, his world. He closed his eyes, thinking about tomorrow, which would most likely be very similar to today. And that was exactly what he loved, the predictability that gave him a sense of control. Jason Barrett fell asleep with the thought that everything in his life was going exactly as it should. Outside the window of their house on Maple Street, nighttime Springfield went on with its life. Streetlights flickered, cars passed by, and a dog barked in the distance. The perfect picture of a middle-class American family was reflected in the dark windows of their house, like a mirror, showing nothing but the surface. April rain drummed on the roof when Jason returned home later than usual. The water treatment plant project was taking up more and more of his time, and today he had to stay late to correct discrepancies in the blueprints that the construction crew had found. He shook the drops off his jacket and listened to the house. Instead of the usual bustle, he heard only quiet music coming from Pearl's room. "Hey, anyone home?" he called as he walked into the kitchen. Milo jumped out from around the corner, holding an unfinished model. "Hi, Dad. Mom said she'd be late from work. Pearl and I ordered pizza and we left you a slice in the fridge." Jason ruffled his son's hair and opened the refrigerator. Sure enough, there was a slice of pepperoni pizza already cold. He took it out and heated it in the microwave, trying to remember if Vanessa had mentioned that she would be late today. "Did Mom call?" he asked when the microwave beeped. "Yeah, around 6. She said she had an important meeting with a new client." Jason nodded, chewing his pizza. Vanessa had been staying late a lot over the past 3 weeks. Her new project required. Slowly but surely, Jason smiled. What interesting things happened today? The children began to talk excitedly about their day. Pearl about a conflict with her literature teacher. Milo about how his team won a football game during recess. Jason listened to them while checking his phone. It was a typical cozy evening for the Barrett family, only without Vanessa. At 8:30, when the children had gone to their rooms, Jason heard the key turn in the lock. Vanessa came in, slightly damp from the rain, but with eyes that seemed to be filled with some new light. "Hi," she said, putting her bag on the nightstand and taking off her jacket. "Are the kids asleep yet?" Pearl's doing her homework. Milo's reading before bed, Jason said, coming over and kissing her lightly. How was the meeting? Great, Vanessa went into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. We were able to convince Western Technologies of our investment plan. Brock was just brilliant. Brock? Jason frowned, not remembering the name. Brock Hollingsworth. Vanessa took a sip of water. The new head of the investment department. I told you about him. Jason didn't remember her mentioning the name before, but he nodded. Sure. What's so great about him? Vanessa didn't notice the tension in his voice and continued enthusiastically, "Oh, he's incredibly persuasive. You see, Western was wavering between us and First National, but Brock put together such a presentation that even old Harrison, the skeptic with the perpetually dissatisfied face, finally agreed. He has an amazing understanding of the market and some kind of sixth sense about." She spoke with a liveliness Jason hadn't seen in her for a long time. Usually, her stories about work were dry and informative, but now her face was literally glowing. "Sounds impressive," he said, watching her take off her stud earrings and replace them with longer, silver ones he didn't remember seeing in their jewelry box. "Are those new?" "What?" "Oh, the earrings." Vanessa touched her ear lightly. "I bought them last week. I was passing by a jewelry store and couldn't resist. Are they too much?" "No," Jason shook his head. "They're beautiful." In fact, he couldn't help but notice that Vanessa had been taking more care of her appearance in recent weeks. Her hair was cut slightly shorter than usual, accentuating the line of her neck. A few new blouses, brighter colors than the muted tones she usually preferred. And that perfume, hints of jasmine and something exotic, not the light floral scent she had worn for years. "I'm going to take a shower," Vanessa said, finishing her water. "It's been a long day." "Sure," Jason nodded, watching her slender figure move with a new, subtle grace. When they went to bed later, Vanessa fell asleep quickly, but Jason lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Something had changed, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Small details that meant nothing on their own, but together created a sense of shift, like fine cracks in a foundation that an expert would notice long before the building began to collapse. The next 2 weeks only heightened his unease. Vanessa was staying late at work more often, sometimes coming home after the children had gone to bed. Brock's name came up in her conversations with such regularity that Jason began to flinch every time he heard it. Brock said the market could turn around by the fall. Brock suggested an interesting approach to diversifying the portfolio. Brock had the whole department laughing today with a story about his trip to Japan. Brock. An invisible man who seemed to be taking up more and more space in their home. On Saturday morning, while the kids were at their activities, Pearl at rehearsal for the school play, Milo at football practice, Jason and Vanessa ate breakfast in the kitchen in an unfamiliar silence. She was looking through some documents and he was reading the news on his tablet, glancing at her from time to time. "Do you have a lot of work today?" he finally asked. "Not really." Vanessa looked up from her papers. "I just want to look over a few reports before Monday. I was thinking, maybe we could go out somewhere tonight, just you and me. It's been a while since we've gone out." She smiled, and for a moment Jason thought everything was back to the way it used to be. "Sounds great." Vanessa nodded and returned to her documents. Jason felt a surge of hope. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe all these changes were just part of her professional growth, a new stage in her career. He decided to put his doubts aside and focus on the upcoming date. That afternoon, when Vanessa went to the store and Jason was home alone, his gaze fell on her purse, left on the table in the hallway. He never checked her things. Trust was the foundation of their relationship. But some uneasy feeling, some instinct, compelled him to go over and look inside. Among the usual items, wallet, keys, lipstick, was a business card. Jason took it out and read, Brock Hollingsworth, Head of Investment, Midland Financial. The card was simple, printed on expensive paper with a minimalist design. But what caught Jason's attention was the inscription on the back, written in confident male handwriting, always in touch, and a cell phone number. He put the card back in its place, feeling both guilty for invading his wife's privacy and alarmed by what he had discovered. What did always in touch mean? Was it just a business courtesy or something more? Jason pushed the thoughts away. He shouldn't doubt Vanessa. She had never given him any reason to be jealous in all their years of marriage. It was just a working relationship, he told himself. A new project, a new team. Of course she needed to stay in touch with her department head. That evening, they went to the Olive Garden. Vanessa wore a dark red dress that Jason hadn't seen before and those same silver earrings. She looked stunning, and when they entered the restaurant, he noticed other men watching her. Over dinner, they talked about their children, work, and plans for the summer. Everything was almost like before, except for one thing. Vanessa checked her phone twice when she thought he wasn't looking. Waiting for an important message? Jason asked when she glanced at the screen for the third time. What? No. She shook her head, quickly putting her phone back in her purse. Just a habit. Sorry. They continued their conversation, but something intangible had changed in the atmosphere. Jason tried to focus on her words, on the taste of the food, on the soft lighting of the restaurant, but his thoughts kept returning. When they got home and checked on the kids, both were already asleep. Vanessa said she was going to take a bath. Jason nodded and headed to the bedroom. Passing the nightstand where she had left her phone, he felt a pang of doubt again. He had never checked her messages before, and the very thought of doing so seemed like a betrayal. But the phone was there, unlocked, and before he could think about what he was doing, his hand reached for it. The name Brock H. was at the top of the list of recent messages. Jason opened the conversation, feeling his heart pound in his chest. Most of the messages were business-related, discussions about meetings, numbers, strategies. But there was something else. Jokes unrelated to work, emojis, communication that went beyond a purely professional relationship. The last message from Brock, sent that evening. How's dinner? Hope you're having a good time. See you at the company picnic tomorrow? Vanessa's reply, dinner's good. Yes, I'll be there tomorrow. Jason put his phone back in exactly the same position it had been in. A company picnic. She hadn't mentioned it. Usually she and the kids always accompanied her to such events. He undressed and lay down in bed, pretending to read when Vanessa returned from the bathroom, enveloped in the scent of her new shower gel. Another small change in her usual habits. Vanessa, he began, trying to sound casual, you didn't mention a picnic tomorrow. She paused for a moment, then continued drying her hair with a towel. Oh, it's just a small department gathering in the park. Nothing special. We usually go to events like that together. It's not really an official event, she explained, avoiding his gaze. Brock just thought we needed some team spirit outside the office. Nothing interesting for you and the kids. Jason nodded, not knowing what else to say. He didn't want to make a scene, but something inside him clenched at the thought of Vanessa spending Sunday with people he didn't know, including this mysterious Brock. Maybe you'll take us with you after all. Pearl and Milo love picnics, he suggested. Vanessa seemed to hesitate. I'm not sure there will be other families there. It'll mostly be employees discussing work in an informal setting. I see. Jason returned to his book, though he couldn't concentrate on the words anymore. That night, he lay awake for a long time, listening to Vanessa's steady breathing beside him. She seemed so familiar and yet so distant, as if part of her was already somewhere else, with other people, in another life he couldn't see or understand. In the morning, Vanessa got up earlier than usual and took a long time getting ready in the bathroom. When she came out, she smelled of new perfume, not the one she usually wore to work. She put on jeans that seemed to perfectly accentuate her figure and a soft blue blouse that Jason didn't remember seeing in her wardrobe. You look beautiful, he said, watching her gather her hair into a loose ponytail. Thanks, she smiled, looking at herself in the mirror. I don't want to look too formal for a picnic. Jason nodded, feeling a strange mixture of pride at how gorgeous his wife looked and anxiety that this beauty was not meant for him today. What time will you be back? I'm not sure, she said, picking up her bag. I think I'll be home for dinner. I'll call you. He walked her to the door and watched her get into her car and drive away. Then he returned to the kitchen where Pearl and Milo were eating breakfast and discussing their plans for the day. Where did Mom go? Milo asked, spreading jam on his toast. To a work picnic, Jason replied, pouring himself some coffee. Why didn't we go with her? Pearl looked up from her phone. We always go to her company parties. This one is just for employees, Jason explained, trying to sound casual. Hey, how about we have our own fun day? Maybe go to the water park? The children enthusiastically embraced the idea, and soon they were planning the trip. Jason tried to focus on their excitement, pushing his own doubts and questions to the back of his mind. The day at the water park was filled with laughter, splashing, and moments of pure happiness with the children. But even amid all the fun, Jason kept checking his phone, waiting for a message from Vanessa. It didn't come until 4 o'clock. Everything's going well. I'll be home by 7. When they returned home, tired but happy, Vanessa was not yet there. Jason made dinner, helped Milo with his science homework, and listened to Pearl's monologue about how hopelessly outdated the music selection was at the school dance. It was a normal evening except for Vanessa's absence. At 7:30, he heard her car pull up. A minute later, she walked into the house, flushed from the sun, her eyes sparkling and a slight smile on her lips. Hi, everyone, she kissed the children. How was your day? While the children chattered away about the water park, Jason watched her. She looked happy. Not just content or satisfied, but truly, deeply happy, as if a light had been lit inside her that he hadn't seen in a very long time, and that light wasn't lit because of him or the children. How was your picnic? He asked when the children had finished their stories. Oh, it was wonderful. Vanessa hesitated for a moment. A few people did, yes, mostly those who work in marketing. That was the wrong answer. If others had brought their families, why had she insisted that they stay home? But Jason decided not to press the issue. Not now, not in front of the children. Later that night, as they lay in bed, he brought it up again. "You seem so happy today," he remarked, watching her apply cream to her hands, another new product in her usually unchanging beauty routine. "Yes," she nodded, rubbing the cream into her skin. "It was nice to spend time with the team in an informal setting. You know, they're a really great group of people. Brock has gathered a bunch of real professionals around him." There it was again, the name that seemed to creep into every conversation, every free moment of their lives. "Tell me about him," Jason asked, trying to sound casual. "About Brock. What's he like?" Vanessa paused for a moment, continuing to rub cream into her hands. "He's inspiring. Very smart, of course, but not in that boring way that financiers often are. He knows how to listen to people, really hear what they're saying. And he has this rare quality of seeing potential in people, even when they don't see it themselves." Jason listened to her and felt something tighten inside him. It was more than just professional admiration. There was something personal, something deep in her voice, something that had previously been reserved for only the closest people in her life. "He sounds like a wonderful man," Jason. She turned her back to him, as she did almost every night now, and soon her breathing became steady, a sign that she was asleep. But Jason lay awake, staring at his wife's silhouette in the darkness, feeling the distance between them seem to grow with each passing day. The invisible cracks were getting deeper, and he didn't know how to fill them or even how to talk about them without risking destroying what was left of their life together. Outside, the wind rustled the maple branches outside their window, and soft shadows danced across the bedroom ceiling. Jason watched them move, trying to organize his thoughts. The rational part of his mind told him he was overthinking things, that Vanessa was simply enjoying a new phase in her career, influenced by a charismatic leader. But a deeper, more instinctive part of him screamed that something much more serious was going on, that someone else was awakening feelings in her, a joy and excitement that had long since disappeared from their relationship. Hundreds of questions swirled through his head. What exactly was going on between Vanessa and Brock? How far had it gone? What should he do? Confront her, ignore the situation, fight for his marriage? And the most agonizing question of all, did he still make Vanessa happy, or had their life together become a habit, a comfortable routine devoid of real passion? With these thoughts, Jason finally fell into a restless sleep in which he wandered through an empty house, searching for something important, something vital, but unable to remember what he had lost. Vanessa Barrett sat in the passenger seat of the bus, watching the suburbs of Springfield give way to rolling hills. The corporate retreat to Pine Ridge Mountain Resort had been planned for months, 3 days of team building, strategy sessions, and, of course, informal socializing. In previous years, Such events had caused her only mild irritation. The need to maintain a professional facade during evening cocktails was exhausting. But this time was different. This time, Brock would be there. She caught herself smiling as she looked out the window and immediately felt a pang of guilt. What was happening to her? She loved Jason. She loved their children, their home, their life. But lately, something had changed. It was as if someone had opened a window in a room where she hadn't noticed how stuffy it was. Lost in thought? The voice of Melanie, her colleague from the analytics department, brought Vanessa back to reality. Just tired. Vanessa turned to the woman sitting next to her. The last few weeks have been stressful. That's for sure, Melanie nodded. Since Hollingsworth joined the department, the pace of work has changed. But the results are impressive, right? Yes, Vanessa agreed, trying to keep her voice neutral. He definitely knows what he's doing. Melanie chuckled and smiled meaningfully. And not just in finance. Have you noticed how the women in the office are flocking around him? Even old maid Patricia from accounting has started wearing makeup. Vanessa laughed politely, though something tightened inside her. Of course, she had noticed. It was hard not to notice how women reacted to Brock, his confidence, his intelligence, the way he looked you in the eye when he spoke to you, as if you were the only person in the world. "He's just a good boss," she said, looking out the window at the pine trees floating by. "He knows how to motivate people." "And not just at work," Melanie winked, but noticing Vanessa's expression, she changed the subject. "Hey, how are your kids? What grade is Pearl in now?" The conversation turned to families and children, and Vanessa joined in with relief, talking about Pearl's latest achievements in a literary contest and Milo's new hobby of computer animation. But part of her mind remained there ahead, where a few rows away sat the man who, in just a few weeks, had made her feel alive. At the same time, 400 kilometers away, Jason Barrett was opening his office in his house on Maple Street. Vanessa had left early in the morning, leaving him with the children for the weekend. "We need this time together," he had said when she apologized for being away. But inside, he felt bitter. Their family weekends used to be sacred, a time when they could all forget about the outside world. The children were still asleep, and the silence in the house weighed heavily on him. Jason turned on his computer, intending to check his work email, but instead opened his photo gallery. Their family vacation in Colorado 3 years ago. Pearl's birthday last year. Christmas, when Milo picked out gifts for everyone for the first time. And Vanessa was everywhere, laughing, loving, his. He closed the gallery and rubbed his eyes. "I'm going crazy," he thought. "It's just work, just a new phase in her career." But the image of Brock's business card with the inscription on the back wouldn't leave him alone. Jason got up and walked over to the wardrobe. Knowing he was doing the wrong thing but unable to stop himself, he began rummaging through Vanessa's things. Nothing suspicious. The same blouses, the same pants, although there were a few new items he hadn't seen before. But when he opened the underwear drawer, he froze. Among the familiar cotton sets were several new ones. Lace, silk, in shades she had never worn before. Maybe she just wanted to treat herself, he tried to rationalize. Women do that sometimes, right? But a voice inside him asked, or maybe she wanted to treat someone else. He closed the drawer and sat down on the bed. feeling a mixture of shame for his intrusion and fear of what might be going on behind his back. Then, deciding to distract himself, Jason began to tidy up the room. Under a stack of papers on Vanessa's bedside table, he found a brochure for the Pine Ridge Hotel. The glossy cover showed a luxurious resort surrounded by greenery, with swimming pools, a spa, and conference rooms. On the back was a schedule of events, business sessions during the day, and cocktail parties, wine tastings, and a dance evening. Jason imagined Vanessa at such an evening in one of her new dresses, perhaps with Brock by her side. The thought made him feel nauseous. He put the brochure aside and took a deep breath. "Pull yourself together, Barrett," he ordered himself. "You're being paranoid. Nothing's happening. It's just a business trip." His phone vibrated in his pocket, a message from Vanessa. "We've arrived at the hotel. It's very beautiful here. How are the kids?" He replied briefly. "Everything's fine. They're still asleep. Have a good session." A minute later, her reply came. "Thanks. Love you all." Those 3 words should have calmed him down, but for some reason they only increased his anxiety. All of you, not you, not him personally, but them as a family, as a unit, as a responsibility. A few 100 kilometers away, Vanessa stood on the balcony of her room, looking at the mountain peaks. Her room had only one balcony, connecting 2 rooms. The neighboring room belonged to Jennifer from marketing, but for some reason, this detail made Vanessa feel strangely disappointed. After registration, a welcome breakfast awaited the participants. Vanessa sat down at a table where Melanie, Richard from financial planning, and Nancy from HR were already seated. They were talking about the latest quarterly results and the new advertising campaign when Brock approached them. "Good morning, team," he smiled, his gaze lingering on Vanessa for a split second. "Is this seat free?" They moved over and he sat down next to her. Vanessa caught a whiff of his aftershave, cedar and something citrusy, and noticed his sleeve brushing against her hand on the table. "How was your trip, Vanessa?" he asked. "Hope it wasn't too tiring?" "Not at all," she replied, surprised at how she managed to speak normally when her heart was beating like crazy. "Beautiful scenery. Wait until sunset." He leaned slightly. "Of course," she nodded, trying to look casual. Breakfast was followed by the first strategy session, then lunch, then another session. Vanessa was completely focused on her work, but part of her was constantly aware of Brock's presence in the room, the way he moved, talked, listened. In the evening, when she returned to her room to change for the cocktail party, she stopped in front of the mirror. 40 was an age when a woman could still be attractive, but was beginning to notice the first serious signs of aging. Fine lines around her eyes, a slight weariness in her features. She took out the new dark blue dress she had bought especially for this trip and her makeup bag. After a quick shower, she applied her makeup, a little more expressive than usual, and put on the dress. Finishing her look with silver earrings and a drop of new perfume, Vanessa looked at herself critically. The woman in the mirror looked alive. Her eyes sparkled, her cheeks were slightly pink. "You're married," she reminded herself. "You have 2 children. What are you doing?" But she knew what she was doing. She was getting ready for an evening where Brock would be. The man who, over the past few weeks, had made her feel like more than just a mother, more than just a wife, more than just an analyst. A woman. A living woman with desires, dreams, passions. Her phone rang. It was Jason. She took a deep breath and answered, "Hi." "Hi." His voice sounded normal, but "Fine. Pearl's at rehearsal, Milo's playing video games. I was thinking maybe tomorrow I'll take them to the water park." "That's a great idea," she said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "They'll love it." There was a pause, and Vanessa felt a familiar tension, one that had been cropping up more and more often lately. It was as if they both knew there was something else to say but couldn't find the words. "Well, I won't keep you," Jason finally said. "Have fun tonight." "Thanks," she bit her lip. "You too." When they finished talking, Vanessa sat motionless for a few more minutes. 15 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, the house she had always dreamed of, and now it all seemed so distant, as if it were someone else's life that she was watching from the sidelines. She shook her head and stood up. "It's just a cocktail party," she told herself. "Nothing will happen. You just want to feel wanted. It's normal." When she went down to the terrace bar, the sun was already setting behind the mountains, painting the sky shades of pink and gold. Her colleagues had gathered in small groups, holding glasses of wine and cocktails. Vanessa took a glass of Chardonnay and walked over to the group where Melanie and a few other women from the department were standing. After 10 minutes of small talk, she sensed someone behind her and turned around. Brock was standing next to her, wearing dark pants and a white shirt with an open collar, holding a glass of amber liquid. Whiskey, she guessed. "I told you the view would be amazing," he said, nodding toward the sunset. Then, leaning a little closer, he added quietly, "But not as amazing as you in that dress." Her cheeks flushed, and she felt her pulse quicken. "Thank you," she said, taking a sip of wine to hide her embarrassment. "Would you like to take a walk?" He nodded toward a small path leading from the terrace into the garden. "I'd like to discuss a strategy for Western technologies with you." "Of course," she nodded, ignoring Melanie's meaningful glances. They walked along the winding path among the pine trees, talking about work, numbers, forecasts, strategies. But beneath the professional conversation, something else was going on. An unspoken attraction, an awareness of closeness, accidental moments when their hands almost touched. "You know, I've never met anyone like you in the corporate world," Brock said suddenly, stopping at a small bench overlooking the valley. He sat down next to her, not too close, but not too far away. "Most analysts only see numbers, trends, graphs. You see the people behind them. That's a rare quality." "Thank you." She looked at her hands, not knowing where to look. "You don't seem like a typical executive either." "Is that a compliment?" "Definitely." She looked up and met his gaze. Something changed in the air between them, as if an invisible wall had begun to melt. Brock looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite place, a mixture of admiration, desire, and something else, something deeper. "Vanessa," he began quietly. "Don't," she shook her head, suddenly afraid of what he might say. "I'm married." "I know," he nodded, "and I respect that. It's just, you deserve to know that you're seen." Those words hit her right in the heart. When was the last time Jason had really seen her? Not as the mother of his children, not as his housekeeper, not as a constant in the equation of his life, but as a person with her own desires, fears, dreams. "We should probably get back," she said, standing up. "The others will be looking for us." "Of course," he said, following her. As they walked back, Brock gently took her hand. It was just for a second, a light touch that could have been dismissed as accidental if not for the look they exchanged. That look said more than hours of conversation. Returning to her room late in the evening after several hours of conversation and a couple more glasses of wine, Vanessa stood under the hot shower, letting the water wash away the tension of the day. What was she doing? Playing with fire? Or finally admitting what she had been hiding from herself for years, that her marriage had long since become routine, that the passion that had once bound her to Jason had disappeared, leaving only habit and obligation. She dried herself off, put on her pajamas, then lay down in bed and stared at the ceiling. The room next door was quiet. Jennifer was either already asleep or hadn't returned from the party yet. Vanessa imagined that instead of Jennifer, it could have been Brock, just a few feet away behind the thin wall. She needed to talk to someone. She picked up her phone and thought for a moment about calling Jason. But what could she say to him? "I'm sorry, honey, but I have strong feelings for a colleague and I don't know what to do about it." Instead, she opened her messages and found a conversation with Brock. "Thanks for tonight. Good night," she wrote, pressed send, and immediately regretted it. Too intimate, too meaningful. His reply came almost instantly. "Thank you. Sweet dreams, Vanessa." 5 words that made her heart ache. At the same time, far from Pine Ridge, Jason Barrett lay awake in their marital bed. The children were fast asleep. The house was quiet. Insomnia had become his constant companion in recent weeks. He checked his phone. No new messages from her since their brief conversation that evening. Probably busy with colleagues. Probably having fun. Probably. He forced himself to stop the flow of thoughts that inevitably led to images he didn't want to see. Instead, Jason forced himself to think rationally. What did he have? Circumstantial evidence, new clothes, new perfume, late nights, a name that came up too often in conversation, and a business card with a phone number. Nothing concrete, nothing that proved she was cheating on him. But then why did he feel like the ground was falling out from under him? Why did he wake up every morning with a heavy heart? Why did the darkest scenarios play out in his head every time Vanessa was late? Maybe the problem was with him. In recent years, he had become so immersed in his work, his routine, his daily responsibilities that he had forgotten to look at Vanessa the way he did at the beginning of their relationship, with admiration, desire, genuine interest. Maybe he was to blame for her paying attention to someone else. Jason got out of bed and went down to the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. Somewhere out there, in the mountains, his wife was at a resort with a man who was probably looking at her the way he used to look at her. What should he do? Keep quiet and hope it would blow over? Make a scene? Try to become a better, more interesting person, to rekindle the spark that had once been between them? He finished his water and put the glass down. Tomorrow he would take the children to the water park. He would smile, joke, and pretend that everything was fine. And then, when Vanessa returned, they would have to talk. Really talk. Not about bills, not about the children's schoolwork, not about everyday trifles, but about themselves. About what was happening. About what might happen next. In her room at Pine Ridge, Vanessa finally fell into a restless sleep. She dreamed of a maze where she wandered, trying to find her way out. At every turn, different people awaited her. Jason with his calm smile and confidence, Brock with his magnetism and intensity, children with their innocent faces and trusting eyes. And each time she had to choose. Above the mountains, the stars continued to shine, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding below them. Two souls, separated by distance but connected by 15 years of shared life, lay awake, each on their own side of the night, asking themselves the same questions, finding no answers, not knowing what fate had in store for them. Sunday evening was filled with quiet tension when Vanessa returned from a corporate outing. Jason met her in the hallway, an attempt at normalcy, a light hug, questions about her trip. The children rushed joyfully to their mother, interrupting each other with stories about their visit to the water park. "Mom, I jumped off the highest tower." Milo's eyes sparkled with pride. "He screamed like a girl," Pearl snorted, "but he jumped anyway." "That's not true." "Of course, a warrior." Vanessa hugged her son, trying not to notice Jason's attentive gaze. "I'm so proud of you." The evening passed in the usual routine. Dinner prepared by Jason, homework checked, preparations for the school week. But behind the mundane activities, something unspoken was hidden. Vanessa avoided her husband's gaze, and he watched her with wary attention, noting every time she checked her phone. When the children finally went to their rooms, Jason and Vanessa were left alone in the kitchen. He washed the dishes, she dried them, and the silence between them grew heavier. "How was your trip?" he asked, trying to make the question sound casual. "Productive," Vanessa nodded. "Lots of new strategies, plans for next quarter." "That's it?" Jason turned off the water and turned to her, leaning against the wet sink. "Vanessa, I'm not blind," he said quietly but firmly. "Something's going on. You've changed in the last few weeks. New clothes, new perfume, coming home late. And constantly that name, Brock, Brock, Brock." Her face froze like a mask, but her eyes betrayed her. They flashed with alarm mixed with guilt. "It's my job, Jason. Don't make a fool of me," he shook his head. "I found his business card. Always in touch? Is that standard text for business contacts?" Vanessa slowly placed the towel on the countertop. "Have you been going through my things?" Her voice took on a defensive tone. "Is that all you can say?" Jason felt anger rising inside him. "I've lived with you for 15 years. I know when something's wrong." They stood facing each other, separated not only by the kitchen island but by a growing chasm of misunderstanding. Vanessa looked away first, staring out the window at the dark street. "Let's talk in the living room," she said quietly. "I don't want the kids to hear." They moved to the living room and sat on opposite ends of the couch, the physical embodiment of the emotional distance between them. Jason waited, giving her a chance to start the conversation. "I don't know how to explain it," Vanessa finally said, looking at her hands. "I didn't plan any of this, but when Brock showed up at the office, something changed. He sees me, Jason. Not as the mother of your children, not as part of this house, but as a separate person, with her own thoughts, ambitions, desires." "And I don't?" Jason asked. "Yes, you were proud." She looked at him with sudden bitterness. "But when was the last time you really asked me what I wanted? When was the last time we talked about anything other than the children, bills, schedules? We've become functions to each other, Jason. You're a reliable husband and father. I'm a responsible wife and mother. Where are we in that?" Her words hit him like a slap in the face. He wanted to argue, to remind her of all the times he had been attentive and caring, but the truth was that in recent years their relationship had indeed become routine. "And Brock is the answer to that?" he asked, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. Vanessa shook her head, and tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't know, Jason. I'm confused. I love our children, I love our life, but at the same time I feel like something important is slipping away from me. Brock. He awakened. Did you sleep with him?" The question slipped out before Jason could think. "No." Her indignation seemed genuine. "No, there was nothing between us, but what?" Vanessa took a deep breath as if gathering strength to jump into icy water. "But I've been thinking about it," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "And part of me wants to find out how I really feel. I know it sounds awful, but what if I need to go through this to figure out what I really want?" Jason stared at her, unable to believe his ears. "You're suggesting what? Permission to cheat?" I don't know what I'm suggesting. She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. I'm just trying. The truth? He stood up too, his voice trembling with suppressed emotion. The truth is that you want my blessing to sleep with another man. What kind of normal person would agree to that? I'm not asking for your blessing. Her voice rose, and she immediately looked fearfully at the stairs leading to the children's rooms. Lowering her voice, she continued, I'm trying to understand what's happening to me, to us. I don't want to destroy our family, but I also can't ignore how I feel. Jason looked at the woman in front of him, so familiar and yet so foreign. This Vanessa, talking about her attraction to another man, was not the girl he had fallen in love with 15 years ago, not the woman he had sworn to be faithful to. You know what's ironic? He said bitterly. I always thought that if our marriage ever came under threat, it would be because of me, because of my obsession with work, because of my emotional detachment. I never thought it would be you. Jason, please. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I didn't want this. I wasn't looking for these feelings. But you didn't exactly resist them, did you? He shook his head. New clothes, new perfume. It was all for him, not for me. She didn't answer, and her silence spoke louder than any words. What would you say if I came to you with an offer like that? He asked. If I said I wanted to spend the night with a colleague to sort out my feelings? I don't know. Yes, you do, he insisted. You'd think I was. They stood in the living room of their home, a home they had built together over the years, filling it with memories, happiness, and love. Now that same home felt like a battlefield where everything they had thought was unbreakable was crumbling. I need to think, Jason finally said, heading for the door. I can't make a decision right now. Where are you going? Vanessa asked fearfully. To get some air. Don't worry, I'll be back. The children shouldn't suffer because of us. He stepped out into the night without looking back, and Vanessa was left alone in the silence of their home, listening to the clock on the wall ticking away the seconds of a life that seemed to be falling apart. Jason returned 2 hours later, smelling of the night air and with red eyes. They didn't talk. The next morning, they put on a show of normality in front of the children. Breakfast together, the usual phrases, the usual actions. But behind this facade lurked a deep rift that both of them felt but didn't know how to heal. A week passed in this strange state, cold politeness on the surface and turbulent emotions beneath. They avoided being alone together, spoke only when necessary, and lived like neighbors rather than husband and wife. Jason came home late. Vanessa left early. The children, sensitive like all children, noticed the change. Did you and Dad have a fight? Pearl asked one evening when Vanessa was helping her with a history project. What makes you think that? Vanessa tried to sound surprised. You don't talk to each other, the girl shrugged. And Dad sleeps in the guest room. I'm not stupid, Mom. Vanessa felt her heart tighten. Of course, adults go through difficult times, sweetheart, she said, hugging her daughter. But we'll work it out, I promise. You're not getting divorced, are you? Pearl's voice was filled with fear. No, Vanessa replied, not knowing if it was true. No, we're just going through a difficult period. On Thursday evening, after the children were asleep, Vanessa sat in her home office, reviewing work documents. Her phone vibrated. A message from Brock. Missing our conversations. Lunch tomorrow? She stared at the screen, feeling a familiar rush of excitement. How easy it would be to say yes, to dive back into the feeling of novelty and desirability he gave her. 15 years of marriage, 2 children who loved them both, needed them both, a house full of memories. And Jason, not perfect, perhaps even a little boring in his predictability, but always reliable, always loving. She remembered how he had supported her during her difficult pregnancy with Milo, how he had never complained when she had to stay late at work, how proud he was of her every achievement. Yes, maybe in recent years they had become more like functions than people to each other, but wasn't that the natural evolution of a relationship? Was it worth destroying everything they had built? Vanessa put down her phone without replying to the message. Instead, she stood up and slowly walked to the guest room. The door was ajar, and she could see the silhouette of Jason lying on the bed with a book. He turned his head and nodded, putting the book down. Vanessa entered and sat down on the edge of the bed, keeping her distance between them. "I've been thinking a lot these past few days," she began. "About us, about our children, about what happened." Jason remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "I wasn't honest with you," she continued, "and with myself too. I was looking for something, some excitement, some confirmation that I could still feel alive. And when Brock came along with his attention, his admiration, I let myself get carried away." "And now?" Jason asked, his voice sounding tired. "Have you decided what you want?" Vanessa, she saw Jason's shoulders relax slightly, but his face remained wary. "What's changed?" he asked. "I realize that our problem isn't that you're not the right man, or that I'm not the right woman. The problem is that we stopped seeing each other. We got caught up in the routine, in our responsibilities, and forgot who we really are. And instead of working on it together, I looked for an easy way out." Jason sat down slowly, looking at her intently. "What if we can't get back what we had?" he asked. "What if we've changed too much?" "Then we'll create something new," she replied simply. "But I want to try, Jason. I want to fight for us, if you want to, too." He looked at her for a long time, as if trying to see the truth behind her words, to understand if she was sincere. "What about Brock?" he finally asked. "I'll tell him I can't go on," she said firmly. "Tomorrow." Jason nodded, and a glimmer of hope appeared in his eyes. "It won't be easy," he warned. "Trust, it's been damaged." "I know," she said, lowering her eyes. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I hurt you." They sat in silence, separated by the space between them and the weight of everything that had happened. But for the first time in a long time, the silence wasn't hostile. It held the promise of a new beginning. "Can I go back to our bedroom?" Jason asked quietly. Vanessa nodded, and a faint smile touched her lips. "Please." They didn't hug or kiss, but as they walked down the hallway to their shared room, something changed in the air between them, like the first ray of sunlight after a long, dark night. The next morning, upon entering her office, Vanessa headed straight for Brock's office. He smiled. "We need to talk," she said. He nodded and closed the office door. "I'm listening." Vanessa looked at him, handsome, confident, the man who made her heart beat faster. But now she saw clearly. What she felt was not love, but a reaction to the attention, the novelty, the opportunity to escape a reality that seemed too mundane. "I can't continue what started between us," she said bluntly. "I'm married. I have a family I don't want to lose." Brock looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, his voice sounding disappointed but respectful. "I never wanted to destroy your family, Vanessa." "I know," she smiled weakly, "and it's not your fault. It's my choice, my responsibility. Can we still work together?" he asked. "Of course," she nodded. "You're a great boss, and I learn a lot from you. But just work, nothing more." He accepted her terms with dignity, and she felt relieved. As she left his office, Vanessa felt a strange lightness, as if she had shed a heavy burden she hadn't noticed, but which had been weighing on her all this time. She returned home earlier than usual that evening and found Jason in the kitchen preparing dinner. He looked surprised to see her. "You're early," he remarked. "Yes," she said, placing her bag on the table. "I spoke with Brock." Jason froze, looking at her questioningly. "It's over," she said simply. "It never really started, but now it definitely won't." He nodded, and something in his expression changed. A hint of warmth that had been missing. Vanessa walked over to him and, after a moment's hesitation, hugged him. He stood motionless for a moment, then his arms wrapped around her, and they just stood there, holding each other in the middle of the kitchen, listening to the children arguing about something insignificant somewhere in the house. "We have a lot to talk about," Jason said when they pulled apart. "I know," Vanessa nodded, "and we will. But tonight, I just want to be home, with you and the kids." He smiled, and Vanessa felt something inside her respond to that smile, a quiet, familiar feeling she had almost forgotten in her pursuit of bright but superficial excitement. They finished making dinner together, called the children, and sat down at the table, a family battered by a storm but still together. Pearl and Milo noticed the change. Their parents were talking to each other again, smiling again, and the tension that had hung in the house for the last few days began to dissipate. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Jason and Vanessa sat in the living room with 2 glasses of wine they had barely touched. "What now?" Jason asked. "How do we move forward?" Vanessa thought for a moment. "I think we need to get to know each other again," she said. "Find out who we've become over the years. And maybe remember why we fell in love in the first place." Jason nodded, a thoughtful smile crossing his face. "You know, I still remember our first weekend together," he said. "In that cabin by Shelbyville Lake. You drove me crazy with your laughter and your stories about the stars. And I remember how you tried to cook dinner but burned it, and we ate chips and drank cheap wine sitting on the pier." She smiled at the memory. "That cabin is still for rent," he said unexpectedly. "I checked the other day. I was thinking, maybe we should go there, just you and me, to remember how it all began." Vanessa looked at him in surprise. It was so unlike the methodical, predictable Jason to suggest a spontaneous trip. "What about the kids?" she asked. "They can stay with my parents for the weekend," he replied. "They'll love it." She looked at this man, her husband, the father of her children, the man she had lived with for 15 years. Jason took her hand, and that simple touch held a promise, not of returning to the past, but of creating something new on the foundation of everything they had been through together. "Then let's go," he said. "Next weekend." They sat there, holding hands in the silence of their home, surrounded by shadows and memories of 15 years of life together. Ahead lay the unknown, difficult conversations, work to rebuild trust, and a search for a new balance. But in that moment, in that silence, there was something else. A fragile but real hope that from the ruins of what had almost been destroyed, they could build something stronger, deeper, and more honest. On Friday, Jason and Vanessa left the children with their grandparents and drove to the cabin on Shelbyville Lake that held so many memories for them. On the way, they cautiously began to reconnect, reminiscing about past trips. The cabin remained almost unchanged, a reminder of when they were newlyweds making plans for the future. Walking along the lake shore, they had their first real conversation in a long time. "When did we stop believing in each other like that?" Jason asked. "When did everything become so complicated?" "It happened gradually," Vanessa replied. "We became more parents and workers than the man and woman who used to jump into the lake at night." That evening, sitting by the fireplace, they discussed their fears and disappointments honestly. Jason admitted that he was afraid of not being interesting enough for her, and Vanessa confessed that she felt her husband saw her only as a function, not as a person with dreams. "Love isn't something that happens to you once," Jason said. "It's something you choose every day." And we stopped making that choice, Vanessa agreed. They agreed to set aside time just for the two of them, rework their schedules, and even see a family therapist, a step Jason had previously considered pointless. On the way home, they held hands, ready to start over. Their children greeted them with the question, "Are you guys back together?" "Yes," Jason replied. "We made up." "But that doesn't mean everything will always be perfect," added Vanessa. "We'll work on it every day." Now they knew that love was a daily choice that required attention, effort, and honesty, and they were ready to make that choice every day, again and again.